The Six-Day War, fought between June 5th and 10th, 1967, was a conflict that reshaped the political landscape of the Middle East. The seeds of this conflict were sown in the years following World War II, with the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, and the subsequent displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The region became a powder keg of competing nationalisms, religious tensions, and Cold War rivalries. This essay delves into the events leading up to the Six-Day War, examining the key battles, political strategies, and the war's lasting impact on the Middle East. By drawing upon primary sources and historical analysis, we aim to provide a clear and factual account of this pivotal moment in history. In the years leading up to 1967, the Middle East was a region on edge. Israel, still in its infancy as a nation, faced constant threats from its Arab neighbors. The memory of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which resulted in Israel's victory but fueled resentment and a desire for revenge among Arabs, loomed large. Meanwhile, the Cold War cast a long shadow over the region, with the United States backing Israel and the Soviet Union supporting Arab states like Egypt and Syria. This superpower rivalry further inflamed tensions and created a complex web of alliances and enmities. The Suez Crisis of 1956, which saw Israel, Britain, and France launch a coordinated attack on Egypt, only deepened the animosity between Israel and its neighbors. Although Israel gained control of the Sinai Peninsula during the conflict, it was forced to withdraw under international pressure. This experience left a lasting scar on the Israeli psyche, reinforcing the perception that the country was constantly under threat and could not rely on international support. The years following the Suez Crisis were marked by sporadic border clashes and a growing sense of inevitability that another war was on the horizon. The situation further deteriorated in the early 1960s with the rise of Pan-Arabism, a movement that sought to unify the Arab world under a single banner. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic president of Egypt, emerged as a leading figure in this movement, championing Arab unity and vowing to liberate Palestine from Israeli control. Nasser's rhetoric resonated deeply across the Arab world, fueling anti-Israel sentiment and creating a climate of fear and uncertainty within Israel. As tensions continued to escalate, the stage was set for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences. By the mid-1960s, the situation in the Middle East had reached a boiling point. A series of events, both local and international, conspired to push the region closer to the brink of war. One such event was the formation of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, in 1964. The PLO, dedicated to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, began carrying out cross-border raids into Israel from neighboring Jordan and Syria. These attacks, though relatively small in scale, heightened Israeli anxieties and fueled calls for a forceful response. Meanwhile, Egypt under Nasser continued to escalate tension. In 1967, Egypt signed a mutual defense pact with Jordan, further solidifying the Arab front against Israel. Nasser then made a series of provocative moves, including expelling UN peacekeepers from the Sinai Peninsula and closing the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. This last action, seen by Israel as an act of war, effectively cut off Israel's southern port of Eilat and significantly hampered its access to international trade. Facing what it perceived as an existential threat, Israel found itself increasingly isolated diplomatically. The international community, preoccupied with the Cold War and reluctant to risk a wider conflict, failed to take decisive action to defuse the crisis. The United States, while sympathetic to Israel's plight, was bogged down in Vietnam and unwilling to risk alienating its Arab allies. The Soviet Union, eager to exploit the situation to its advantage, actively encouraged Arab aggression while providing misleading intelligence to Egypt and Syria, further stoking the flames of war. As diplomatic efforts floundered and the threat of war loomed, Israel faced a stark choice: wait for an inevitable Arab attack or launch a preemptive strike. The Israeli leadership, haunted by the memory of the Holocaust and determined to avoid another genocide, ultimately chose the latter. On the morning of June 5, 1967, Israel launched Operation Focus, a surprise air attack that marked the beginning of the Six-Day War. This decision to strike first would have profound implications, both for the immediate outcome of the war and for the decades of conflict that followed. At 7:45 a.m. on June 5, 1967, Israeli warplanes roared into action, launching a surprise attack on Egyptian airfields. Operation Focus, meticulously planned and executed with stunning precision, caught the Egyptian Air Force completely off guard. Within hours, the Israeli Air Force had decimated the Egyptian Air Force, destroying hundreds of aircraft while they were still on the ground. This preemptive strike effectively crippled Egypt's ability to defend itself and paved the way for a swift and decisive Israeli victory. The effectiveness of the Israeli air campaign was due in part to meticulous planning and intelligence gathering. Israeli pilots had trained extensively on mock-ups of Egyptian air bases, and their aircraft were equipped with advanced weaponry. Moreover, Israeli intelligence had successfully infiltrated Egyptian ranks, providing valuable information about enemy positions and capabilities. This combination of tactical brilliance, technological superiority, and effective intelligence gathering proved devastating for the Egyptian forces. The impact of the Israeli airstrike extended far beyond the destruction of Egyptian aircraft. The sudden and overwhelming nature of the attack sent shockwaves through the Arab world, shattering the myth of Arab invincibility and leaving Egypt's allies reeling. Jordan and Syria, initially hesitant to fully commit to the conflict, now found themselves drawn into a war they were ill-prepared to fight. The psychological impact of the Israeli air campaign, as well as the material losses inflicted, played a crucial role in shaping the course of the war in the days that followed. The success of Operation Focus on the first day of the war gave Israel a crucial advantage. With air superiority secured, Israeli ground forces could now advance rapidly into the Sinai Peninsula and the West Bank, facing significantly less resistance than anticipated. The swiftness and decisiveness of the Israeli victory on the first day of the war would have a lasting impact on the strategic balance of power in the Middle East, solidifying Israel's military dominance and shaping the contours of the Arab-Israeli conflict for decades to come. Day 2. Conquering the Sinai, a desert blitzkrieg. With the Egyptian Air Force effectively neutralized, Israeli ground forces launched a lightning offensive into the Sinai Peninsula on the second day of the war. Employing a strategy of rapid maneuver and overwhelming firepower, Israeli tanks and armored units swiftly outmaneuvered and defeated the larger but less mobile Egyptian forces. The Israeli military, led by experienced commanders such as Ariel Sharon and Moshe Dayan, demonstrated a high degree of tactical skill and coordination, exploiting weaknesses in the Egyptian defenses and pressing their advantage relentlessly. The Sinai campaign was characterized by a series of decisive engagements fought in the scorching desert heat. At Abu Agela, Israeli forces broke through heavily fortified Egyptian positions, paving the way for a deep thrust into the Sinai. Further south, at Mitla Pass, Israeli paratroopers engaged in fierce close-quarters combat with Egyptian defenders, securing a strategic route through the rugged terrain. The speed and ferocity of the Israeli advance caught the Egyptians off guard, leading to widespread confusion and demoralization within their ranks. As Israeli forces advanced rapidly westward, Egyptian resistance crumbled. Poorly led and demoralized by the losses suffered in the air campaign, Egyptian troops began to retreat in disarray. By the fourth day of the war, Israeli forces had reached the Suez Canal, having captured the entire Sinai Peninsula in a stunning display of military prowess. The capture of the Sinai, a strategic buffer zone between Israel and Egypt, represented a major victory for Israel and significantly altered the balance of power in the region. The swift collapse of the Egyptian defenses in the Sinai had far-reaching consequences. Nasser, once hailed as a hero of the Arab world, was humiliated by the defeat. The myth of Arab unity, carefully cultivated in the years leading up to the war, lay shattered. Moreover, the loss of the Sinai left Egypt vulnerable to further Israeli attacks and would have a profound impact on the course of future negotiations between the two countries. The Israeli victory in the Sinai, achieved through a combination of military superiority, tactical brilliance, and Egyptian blunders, would cast a long shadow over the region for years to come. Day 3. Securing the West Bank, a battle for Jerusalem. As the Israeli offensive in the Sinai gained momentum, fighting erupted on a second front, the West Bank. This region, under Jordanian control since 1948, held immense religious and historical significance for both Israelis and Palestinians. The battle for the West Bank, and particularly for Jerusalem, would prove to be one of the most consequential and emotionally charged of the entire war. On June 7, 1967, Israeli forces launched their assault on East Jerusalem, which housed the Old City and its holy sites. Jordanian troops, entrenched in fortified positions throughout the Old City, put up fierce resistance. The fighting was intense and often took place at close quarters, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides. However, Israeli forces, driven by a combination of military objectives and religious zeal, fought with determination, ultimately prevailing over the Jordanian defenders. The capture of the Old City of Jerusalem was a watershed moment in the Six-Day War. For Israelis, it represented the reunification of their ancient capital and a fulfillment of a long-held dream. For Palestinians, it marked the beginning of a new era of Israeli occupation that continues to this day. The battle for Jerusalem, while brief, would have profound and lasting consequences for both sides, shaping the political, religious, and emotional landscape of the region for generations to come. Following the capture of Jerusalem, Israeli forces continued their advance southward, capturing the remainder of the West Bank by the end of the war. The swiftness and decisiveness of the Israeli victory in the West Bank, much like in the Sinai, shocked the Arab world and had a profound impact on the balance of power in the region. The war's outcome left Israel in control of territories far larger than its pre-war borders, creating a new set of challenges and opportunities that would shape the course of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for decades to come.